Thanks everybody for coming. I can't believe you made it here this week of all weeks when the term is winding down. People are trying to escape town. Good on you. I apologize for the wheezing. I think I don't think I'm contagious anymore, but you might want to just bump elbows with me afterwards rather than shake hands. I've been getting the same flu as everybody else. One of the things that I try to do in my teaching is make my students active participants in their learning. And I also want to show that I respect their time. I don't think that it shows a great deal of respect for our students' time if we ask them to read something and then we just summarize the very thing they've read on a slide when they come into the lecture hall afterwards. I think that our busy students, when they have many courses and other obligations to juggle, if they realize that you're just going to recap everything important that happened in the reading, are probably going to decide not to do the readings and budget their time in different ways rather than spending their time twice on the very same thing. And so over the years, I've tried to develop various ways to try to help my students read before class, but they don't always know how to read very effectively. And so I'm working on various kinds of scaffolding that train students to bring a particular kind of critical lens to their reading. The particular course I want to show you an example from is a cross-listed course in philosophy and women's studies. So you'll see that the kinds of questions that I'm in particular interested in that course tend to be reflective, kind of critical thinking questions, but there's no reason why you couldn't adapt this method and ask different kinds of questions for a different kind of disciplinary context, right? So there's nothing about these questions in particular that's essential. What I think, though, is really helpful is sorting out what questions are central in your discipline when you, as a professional within your discipline, engage with a text, and then providing this kind of scaffolding to help your students learn to ask the very same questions when they engage with a text. So one of the ways that I try to do this in my classes, and in this particular class, a second year course on gender issues, is by using the quiz function on Learn. And the reason I use the quiz function rather than a Dropbox or something is I want this particular exercise for students to feel like something that they don't have to draft and redraft in advance. It doesn't have to be a big fancy thing. They don't have to remember the structure. All they have to do is do the reading before class and then click on the link and take a little quiz. And I have 4 particular questions I want them to answer. And I don't even want them to have to remember in advance what the questions are. I just want them to take the quiz and be prompted by the questions to think about the reading. So I want to make it as easy and as quick for them as possible. I also make it really flexible for them. You'll see that it's kind of faint here, but I just call them mini replies. I make them in this course do over the whole term 5 different mini replies, but they can do any 5 readings they want. So in this particular course, we probably look at 10 original longer text over the course of the whole term. I'm saying they have to provide some input before class on 5 of them. So I think that's pretty forgiving. It doesn't expect that they're always going to get the reading done before class, but it sets the standard that at least half the time they get the reading done before class and allow themselves a little bit of time to reflect on the readings. The deadline is that for any particular reading, the students must have completed the mini reply quiz before the class discussing that reading starts. Okay. Otherwise, there's no particular topic associated with the quiz. I just know to go in each week and check and make sure that they were commenting on the right reading for that week. And there's lots of flexibility. So obviously the keeners, the very first 5 readings, they do all 5 mini replies and get them out of the way. Other students are racing at the end of the term to get 5 mini replies done. That's less ideal, but there's lots and lots of flexibility for the students. So what are the questions that they see when they take the quiz? As I say, it gives them 4 questions. First, I just ask them to which reading they're replying, just so I can double check that they're actually replying before class. What do I want them to reply before class? Well, again, I want to train them to start doing the readings before class. But I also want them to get used to reflecting on the readings and developing their own accounts and interpretations and understandings of the readings before they hear what I and other students have to say about them. I don't want my voice to be the only authority. I want them to learn to hear their own voices when they engage with the readings. So, to what reading are you replying? What is the main argument, or one of the main arguments of the reading? Obviously, that's going to be a core question in philosophy. What do you like best about the point the author is making, or the author's approach to that point? And what do you find most frustrating, confusing, or objectionable about this reading? So obviously what I'm trying to do with these last two questions is to train them, first of all, to be charitable. I have a lot of pretty controversial readings in this course. Some of them I assign them precisely because I know the students are going to disagree with them. But I want to train them to try to see the best in every reading, even those with which they disagree. But I also want them to be able to articulate clearly with what it is that they disagree when they disagree with the reading. And so I try to balance charity and criticism here in these questions. In terms of grading for these quizzes, I make clear to my students that this is, it's a 1 or a 0 for the quiz. I don't provide them with any comments. They get lots of formative feedback on other assignments that I give them over the term, so it's not onerous for grading. I just give them a 1 or a 0 based on whether or not somebody who hasn't done the reading could have written the answer, right? So if what they find, if what they like best about the reading is that it was really relatable with no examples, they probably haven't done the reading, and I give them a 0, right? If they say, I was able to relate to it because the example of a woman my age really resonated with me, then I have evidence that they've actually done the reading. I make clear to my students that in their answers, they're not being graded for being right or wrong, right? I want this to be an opportunity for them to take risks and have a sort of freedom to fail. I want them to be able to engage with the text and not feel burdened with whether they're understanding it correctly. Rather, I just want them to explore it and try to understand it in their own way. And so even when, especially on that earlier question, what is the main argument? Students often get that question wrong, but I can still tell whether they're actually engaging with the particular text we have in mind. So I'll still give them a full mark even if their answer is wrong. And the great thing here is that if a bunch of students are getting the argument wrong or wrongly emphasizing some portion of the argument, then if I read this before class, it gives me an opportunity when I come into class to help address those particular challenges with the reading. Likewise, obviously, when students share a particular favorite thing about the reading or a particular frustration, then I know that that's something they'll be prepared to discuss in class, and I can start the discussion around something that I know there are several people in the class who have thought about it and written about it and are prepared to say something. And then the conversation's really on their terms. It starts on their terms rather than on mine. So there are lots of good reasons to use this kind of method. The quizzes take students about 2 to 5 minutes to write. It's really not onerous at all. A shocking number of them write their answers at 3 in the morning. That makes me kind of sad. Some do them 5 minutes before class. That makes me less sad. That's kind of probably when I would do them as I was settling in. But in general, I've got a pretty high response rate. And I should say, and this is probably unsurprising, I guess, that I've got a really high participation rate in the class as well. The students come to class prepared to discuss the readings. I thought it might be useful for you to look at a couple of examples of the sorts of things students say. So this was a reading from Foucault, a chapter called We Other Victorians. The student wrote, the main argument of this reading is that society's idea of sex has changed drastically over time. It has gone from being an open topic, a disclosed topic, that is now regarded as sin if talked about or expressed out loud. Let me see, I have another student who also wrote on Foucault. The student wrote, this reading provides a viewpoint that the way sex is discussed in society today can be linked to power. The main argument is that sex used to be a freedom. People could openly speak about their sexuality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can tell very clearly that these students have actually done the reading. Just imagine students coming to your class who are already able to sum up briefly like this what the reading is all about and already have some views to share about the reading. It makes for a much more engaged and informed discussion. And notice as well the way the questions actually draw them through the sort of disciplinary questions that you yourself would ask as a reader. I want to suggest, as I said at the beginning of this session, that there are lots of different kinds of questions that you could ask. This one works really well for the gender issues course. It's a second-year course, and they just sort of need the baby steps laid out for them. Something that I've done successfully in a graduate level course is something called question for consideration. In that case, I want to train them in close reading. And so rather than just saying, what text are you commenting on, I ask them for a particular verbatim quote from the text. So here, give me an actual quote you want to talk about. And then pose an open question that is prompted by this particular passage that you are citing. And when I say open question, it can't be a mere rhetorical question intended to just take down the author. This is an occupational hazard in philosophy. Philosophers often train students just to see what's, see the weak point in every argument. I think that's too easy. I always want to start by seeing what's useful in an argument or useful in a text. And so I make my students ask an open question that they really do want to figure out and puzzle out together about the text. And then I ask them to begin to pose, in a very tentative way, a possible answer to their own question. I don't want them to have fully worked it out. I just want them to sketch some steps we might take to solve this puzzle that they've identified in the reading. And then obviously, this kind of input is something that in say a graduate seminar or a more senior class, you can wrap the whole structure of the class discussion around this sort of focus on texts and problems that students are trying to work out, and they can try to work them out together. So that's a nice method for a more advanced approach. Something that I haven't done yet, but have resolved to do at the next opportunity, is a quiz based on Riker Googling. Who knows Riker Googling? Who knows Riker? Do you remember Riker from Star Trek: The Next Generation? So Riker Googling, oh, I'm about to waste so much of your time. Riker Googling is a Twitter account that imagines what Riker would Google, right? You think about, when your drain is plugged and you Google how to unplug a plugged drain, right? Riker instead Googles simulator accident chocolate hand. Sorry. He also, so the supposition is that Riker isn't very smart. He's situated in space in the future, and yet Google is also his device to solve questions and curiosities that he has. And so you have these short little tweets that are allegedly the Google search box that Riker is typing in. It's occurred to me when I teach, for instance, history of philosophy, that I would like to assign students a Descartes Googling assignment or a Spinoza Googling assignment that would train students in a Twitter-length kind of response to try to identify what the main research questions are of the figures they're reading. And again, I think that the brevity of it and the lightness and the fun of it makes it more accessible to students, and it makes them engage with the reading in a way that, again, allows them some creativity and some freedom to fail. So that's something I want to play with, but the thing I want to emphasize is that there are lots of different ways that you could use that kind of quiz function to get students just engaging with the text or with the course material. And Mary suggested that even though this is a Learn user group, I should tell you about a low-tech alternative that I also use. Are you going to get in trouble now? Mary's idea, not mine. A low-tech alternative that I use in some courses as well to get students reading before class. At the beginning of term, I hand each of them a pile of 3x5 index cards. And I permit them throughout the term, at the beginning of each class, to hand one index card back to me with their name on the top and any notes they have taken about that day's readings. All I do and I keep them throughout the term, I sort them. All I do is make sure that the notes are actually about that day's readings and not about readings from a different date. As long as they satisfy that criterion, I put them in the pile with the others. And then when they come in to sit the final exam, I hand their piles of 3x5 index cards back to them. which is to say that anybody who has done the reading before class and taken notes about the reading before class now has those notes at their elbow when they write the exam, which proves to be a really powerful incentive for them to actually do the reading before class. They can't tell themselves, oh, I'll read it later on in the term. They know that they read it before class and therefore are able to discuss it with the rest of us. Then they're going to have the notes with them for the exam. So there are lots and lots of ways, and there are no grades associated with this, by the way, right? They just want their notes back. There are lots and lots of ways that you can get students answering questions, engaging with the readings, and thinking about the readings before class. And there are tons of advantages of doing this. And I was going to tell you what they were, but then I thought it would be more pedagogically effective if you told me what they are. What are the advantages of doing this? I'm sure you've imagined, hopefully you've imagined whether or not it would work in your class. What about this would work in any of your classes? Yeah.
More informed discussion.
Yeah, you absolutely have a more informed discussion. Absolutely. Anything else?
I love the idea that you are giving them the space to try and fail.
Yeah. So I'm just repeating because I think we're streaming and there are no microphones going around. So we're giving them the space to try and fail. Absolutely. Without penalty, right? The trying actually gets the grade. Anything else? Yeah.
Initiate discussion with others.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, if it goes through their mind, then they may have questions and they may talk to somebody else before class.
Right. Absolutely, and they do come to class chattering. It hadn't even occurred to me it might be because of this. So the comment was that they might actually initiate with discussion with others because they've had a chance to read and write before class. Yeah, Judy?
Providing them a framework for other courses that they could be taking.
Providing a framework for other courses. So those reading skills that they develop in your course are something they can scale and apply elsewhere, right? Yes, Mary?
Makes your job a whole lot more fun.
It makes your job more fun, yeah, because you're not just repeating everything that they were supposed to be reading beforehand. It means you have an actually flipped classroom, right? And now you can have a debate. Yeah. Jane?
I would think too that if they really do some of the work in advance, that just the time space between doing that and coming to class would give, particularly for some readings like this, maybe some time for reflection.
Yeah.
Just sort of, you're walking down the street, you remember something that you read 2 hours ago, and maybe that's when the question comes. So that would make the discussion richer overall.
Absolutely, time for reflection. This is something Jane and I were talking about before this session, actually. How often do you have an initial reaction to something you've read, and then later on when you're walking to work or whatever, it percolates and you have other ideas. Students are kind of on a hamster wheel that doesn't allow them that kind of space. If we can actually get them reading beforehand and then talking about it and engaging at various stages along the way, then it builds in some of that space for reflections. There's a whole different kind of cognition that's possible then as well. Anything else? Yes?
This is sort of related, and that's what I've learned while doing a similar type of thing in a different course. They learn about their own implied belief systems.
Because of these reflective questions, they learn about their own implied belief systems. They're not just attending to the readings. The readings are becoming a lens to look at their own belief systems. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Good. Yeah, Kelly.
It also gives a voice to the quieter students who want to say something in class but are just reluctant.
Yeah. Some people, so Kelly said it can give a voice to quieter students who might be just reluctant to speak in class, and also the students who don't have that super quick kind of cognition. We all know plenty of super smart people who it's kind of 30 minutes later that they've figured it out and they've got something to say and it's well worth hearing, but very often the classroom environment rewards the person who has the immediate response. Right? But there are lots of other different kinds of cognitions that we can reward in this way. And in fact, if you want to use this as a platform to give a voice to quieter students, you can easily combine this with a think, pair, share, right? Have students come in already having done this kind of quiz and then pair them up and have them talk about their quiz results and then discuss. When I do a think, pair, share, I always have my participants talk about what their partner has said. That way the shy person has a partner who can speak on their behalf. And often the shy person is a little bit braver about sharing a partner's views than they're about sharing their own, right? So there are lots of ways you can tweak it to accommodate lots of different learning styles. We have, I think, about 5 or 6 minutes left, so maybe we'll open it up to any general questions you have about the method.
And Mary, have you had anything from the great outdoor world? No? Okay.
I'm just wondering if students ever ask for their index cards back before the exam so they can help, study from them.
No, I make very clear that the whole point is that they get them for the exam. I suppose they could ask, and I would just politely explain why they can't have them back beforehand. I mean, I do lots of other help with study preparation and so forth. It's not meant to be the only thing they bring into the exam. And I'm not even convinced that the students need them that much once they come into the exam. It turns out that students who've been doing the readings all term and thinking and writing about the readings before class are awfully well prepared for the exam by the end of the term. Yeah. Any others? Paul, there's a mic coming over.
Hi, Shannon. Yeah, thanks for the great ideas. My question is, with regards to using the cards to prepare to hand them back for the purpose of the exam, I'm just wondering what kind of an exam are you giving them? What kinds of questions that this information would be useful to them?
Yeah. So again, this is a philosophy course. It wouldn't work in every single class. Typically, and let me tell you a little bit about the readings I use. I always use primary source texts. I don't assign textbook chapters per se. And my typical exam questions would be short answer questions and essay questions. I can say though, I mean, we don't tend to do much in terms of, multiple choice and so forth in philosophy. I wouldn't have any hesitation though with giving them the same kind of support for a multiple choice test, because I think that a well-constructed multiple choice test shouldn't just be about regurgitating facts. It should be about actually showing that you can apply what you've learned, right? And
Why are you insinuating that
there's a rumor that you grade a lot of exams, so I have a hypothesis. But I just wanted to say there are many different kinds of assessments on this campus. And I don't think this only works for short answer and essay question, but I understand that we might be more comfortable with it with short answer and essay questions. Yeah. I think well-constructed assessments are never going to be about just repeating back. They're going to be about application and problem solving. And as we heard really convincingly last week in a talk by Paul Mazur, once we get out in the field, we have our books and our internet and our colleagues at our elbows as we solve problems in the discipline. Assessments that authentically assess disciplinary skills ought to reproduce that.
Super.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So we'll just switch